be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings. I can advise that attendees should not disclose any personal information of individuals, as this would infringe the data protection rights of that individual. May I please ask everyone to mute their microphones when not speaking? And Carol, if you could just turn your video off, because it messes with the recording slightly, but if you want to speak, just put your hand up and we'll be able to signal that to me. So, item 1. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Agnew, Councillor Barrett, the Town Clerk and the Head of Finance. Any other apologies? No. Declarations of interest. So this is to pause to confirm whether anyone has any pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests. So we'll do pecuniary interests first. Any pecuniary interests? No. Any non-pecuniary interests? Also no. Okay, I'm moving on. Item 3. Oh, sorry, Chairman. Councillor Daniels.
Chairman, hi everyone, I'm Paul Daniels, Councillor Paul Daniels actually. I'm from Northern. I'm a sub on this committee normally, but today I'm hoping that the Chairman's going to accept me as a full member, because I don't think Councillor Howe's here. So
yes,
Chairman, is that okay?
That's fine. I think if Councillor Howe's not here, then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 voting central beds councillors and 1, 2, 3, 4 voting town councillors. Councillor Russell, Albon, Strawn and Thomas. And you are subbing for Councillor Agnew.
For Councillor Barrett.
For Councillor Barrett. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So we are very much quorate. Others can contribute to the debate as you wish, but obviously it's for members to vote. Item 3, Chairman's announcements. I don't have any announcements other than to thank officers for all the efforts in putting the papers together for this meeting. Item 4, public open session, to adjourn for a period of up to 15 minutes to allow members of the public to put their questions or to address the committee through the chairman pertaining to items listed on the agenda. Each speaker will give their name to the chairman prior to speaking, which will be recorded in the minutes unless requested otherwise. Each speaker will be allowed 1 3-minute slot, but I have had prior notice of a speaker who I have said may speak for 5 minutes. So does anyone wish to speak? Mr. Wells, would you like to take to the microphone, press the green button and let us know which item you wish to speak on, please?
Thank you, Chair. Mike Wells, speak about 9A, the A1 crossing. In 2024, the owner of Woodlands, the industrial estate alongside the A1 beyond Sainsbury's, applied to develop the remaining 2/3 of his site, and crucial to this was sustainable access across the A1 from Biggleswade, where footpath 7 crosses the dual carriageway. £3 million was offered towards a bridge or an underpass. For this application, CBC officers uploaded 106 documents to CBC's planning portal, but the one I can't find among them is this. Active Travel England is a statutory consultee, and this is ATE's formal response. I found it buried deep in the 652 pages of the developer's transport statement. ATE considered not just the developer's drawing of a footbridge, but it went to the heart of the matter. Active travel issues both at the site and in the surrounding area. ATE said it's not currently in a position to support this application and requests further assessment, evidence revisions, etc., etc. The proposals must prioritise active travel in line with the government's objective for half of local journeys in our towns and cities to be undertaken by walking, wheeling and cycling. This outline application will set key principles and resultant travel patterns and trends that cannot be revisited or revised at the reserve matter stage or thereafter. And the site appears to cater for a new workforce in the region of 300 to 800 employees. Decisions made at the outline stage will have a permanent bearing on the success or otherwise of the need to deliver healthy, sustainable, integrated new communities in line with national and local planning priorities. ATE expects that local pedestrian and cycling routes are identified and be assessed on whether these are safe, direct, convenient and accessible for people of all abilities, paragraph 82 of the National Design Guide, or safe, direct, comfortable and attractive core design principles in LTN 120. Under pedestrian access to local amenities, it noted there are no amenities anywhere within 1 kilometre. There's no dedicated cycling provision with the area, and cyclists are expected to use the road, meaning the A1. The surrounding roads would appear to be particularly hostile to cyclists. It's not clear whether this application complies with the requirements of LTN 120 and inclusive mobility, and the width of the bridge should therefore be 5.5 metres in accordance with LTN 120. LTN 120 is the government's Bible for cycle routes. It says on page 7, routes should be coherent, direct, safe, comfortable and attractive, words which you may just have heard. And on page 13, cycle routes must flow feeling direct and logical. Users should not feel they're having to double back on themselves, turn unnecessarily, or go the long way round. The footbridge ramps would be 127 metres up and the same down, adding more than half a kilometre detour to a round trip. They're drawn as a 5% gradient, which is 1 in 20, but what no one seems to have noticed is that on page 46, LTN mandates that ramps, when they're 60 to 80 metres long, must be 3% or less. This means that compared to a straight-through underpass, the ramps would add an unnecessary 800 metres to a round trip. So far, we've talked only of cyclists, but as AT said, routes must be accessible for people of all abilities. So what of mobility scooters, buggies, parents wheeling children? There's a reason the new bridge at Biggleswade station has lifts up from the platforms. You're not allowed to build only for the fully fit. No one pretends an A1 bridge's ramps would be feasible for wheelchairs, so obviously lifts are required. The station's lifts are tiny, but government design standards say cycles can be up to 2.8 metres long. That's a bike plus a child trailer. So for peak periods, large cargo lifts will be needed, 3 or 4 times the size of the station's ones. And who's going to maintain those day and night? To be large enough for wheelchairs and mobility scooters, they could accommodate instead maybe 40 pedestrians. This is not trivial engineering or maintenance. So much for technicalities. The following is strategic. HM Planning Inspectorate is clear. Nothing's going to get built just west of the A1 until sustainable access to Biggleswade's facilities is possible. CBC has twice refused to develop a permission to build on a field outside my village, 3 miles west of here. In 2023, an inspector turned down the developer's appeal. His paragraphs 25 to 29 discussed accessibility of location. In terms of bus service, minimal service. The service is not dependable, as well as not being realistic, sustainable, or a viable transport option. Residents will travel by car to
Could you conclude, services, please?
And the scheme conflicts with policies HQ1 and T1 of the local plan. Last month, a different inspector.
Could you sum up, please, Mr. Wells? We're at 5 minutes.
Okay.
Is that okay? Thank you. I think we have understood what you've said. Do you want to put one last summary sentence to us? Or is that all right?
Better leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Okay, do we have any members of the public online, Asia? No. Okay, so we have item 5, 6 and 7, but I'm going to skip straight to invited speakers because we have the ICB with us. And we'll come back to items 5, 6 and 7 in due course. So I'm really pleased to welcome 3 members of the ICB who will introduce themselves shortly. We have about 20 minutes for this slot, if that's okay. So perhaps we could start with introductions. Please make sure you switch on your microphones when you speak. I think perhaps just a brief introduction to what the ICB is, who you are, what you do, and then we have provided some questions in advance and hopefully we can work through those. So shall we start with Casey and we can work around.
So good evening, everybody. I'm Casey Conroy. I'm head of the Central Bedfordshire Place team in Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes Integrated Care Board.
Hello, everybody. I've been here before a couple of years ago, and I know some of you quite well. I'm Nikki Barnes. I'm the Associate Director of Estates for BLMK Integrated Care Board. We also have a third colleague joining us by, oh, Steve is down there.
Yes,
Steve, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Steve Guttridge. I'm the head of integrated primary care for the ICB.
Excellent. Well, welcome all, and thank you so much for joining us. I think it would be useful just to bring everybody onto the same page with what the ICB is, what your mandate is, and then perhaps we can work through the questions. I think you've prepared some answers in advance, so happy to hand the floor over to you.
Lovely, thank you. Well, I'll go first, but I'm sure we'll very much do a triple act because I think your questions span all of our areas of portfolios, really. We have been here before, so apologies if some of you are well versed in this, but integrated care boards are responsible for the planning and commissioning of all local health services. So currently our ICB covers Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes. We are going through a process of change at the moment. Big national changes were announced March last year, where integrated care boards are merging into larger organisations, and by April we will be part of Central East Integrated Care Board, which will cover our current footprint plus Hertfordshire, plus Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And that's all part of the government's NHS 10-year plan around ICBs becoming more strategic commissioners, and having a much stronger role around understanding population health need and making sure that local services are responding to that, and particularly to reduce health inequalities where they may occur. So does that give you a flavour for what we do as an ICB? And anything, do you want to add anything, Casey?
No.
No, I think that's a helpful start. So now that we're all on the same page, we've provided 11 questions, nice round number. What's the best place to start? Obviously the big topic in Biggleswade for years has been the health hub and talk of it, but we're obviously not at a point where we have one yet. So perhaps we could start with question one and work through from there.
Would it be okay, Chair, if I just give a bit of an introduction first? Because I think it might help to set the scene about, just to recap on what I shared with this council 2 years ago and what we've been doing in the meantime.
Yeah, let's do that first, and then we can work through the questions that aren't answered. So let's do that. That's
lovely. So I think I last came along here in May 2024. I was quite surprised it was that long ago, actually, and it felt more recent than that. And at that point, we just completed a feasibility study around looking at provision of additional services in Biggleswade and around how we can best utilise the estate in Biggleswade. You might recall that that study had concluded that redeveloping the Biggleswade Community Hospital site, just to make it fit for purpose for the services that are already based there, would be about £7.5 million, because that estate is really old and in very poor condition now. We had also looked at the cost of creating a more integrated facility on that site or other sites in Biggleswade. We'd worked closely with the council to look at a few other sites. And we'd concluded that to develop a facility that would bring together primary care, so Saffron Road Health Centre particularly, our community health services and our mental health services for Biggleswade would have cost about £14 million. And you might recall that had ruled that out as being affordable for us at this stage. That wasn't affordable to the council to find that sort of capital funding, and it certainly wasn't affordable to the NHS. So it wasn't an option for us to develop a big integrated facility in Biggleswade at that stage. We had explained that we were continuing to work with the Salamanca Group, who are leading the development on land east of Biggleswade, to consider how we bring forward some additional health capacity to the east of the town in due course. And you might be aware that we've already secured Section 106 funding in principle, about £3.5 million, that will help us with bringing forward additional capacity when that becomes available, when the housing growth reaches that sort of stage. That therefore meant...
Sorry, could you mute if you're online, please, Councillor North?
That therefore meant that we didn't come up with a solution for the issue of Biggleswade Community Hospital being in such poor condition, and the fact that it needs a lot of investment to keep the buildings there safe and fully usable for staff and for patients. Backlog maintenance, just the things that haven't been done to keep that building in the fit state that we'd want, is already about £2.5 million, and that's growing on a regular basis. In the meantime, so that's where we got to in May 2024, and I explained that with you last time, and we've reported that to committees like the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Central Bedfordshire Council, for example. In the meantime, our community services provider, so the people who provide sort of community nursing, therapy services, etc., They occupy quite a large administrative area in Biggleswade Health Centre, and they've been going through a process of rationalising and consolidating some of their estate, because as you can imagine, they, like everybody else, work very differently since COVID. And they will be vacating that quite large area of the health centre in the next few months. So we've been leading a piece of work with our partners to think how that space can best be used going forward, for the best value for the local community and in a way that could be affordable for all parties. So we haven't concluded that options appraisal yet, but to be really transparent with you, the sorts of options we're looking at include giving a lot more space to the GP practice based there, Saffron Road Health Centre, though they have been clear they wouldn't need all of the space and they couldn't afford the running costs for all of the extra space there. And some of the other options we've been looking at involve moving some or all of the mental health services from the community hospital site into the health centre build. Obviously doing a big capital project there to make it really good quality, fresh accommodation, but to bring them out of some of the buildings where the heating doesn't work half of the year and things like that into much better quality accommodation for them. So, as I say, we're considering quite a few different options, and it's not a straightforward piece of work because there are lots of partners involved. But we hope to have a final preferred way forward within the next few months. And of course, we'd be happy to have a further conversation at that stage. And if we were to arrive at a proposal to move some of the patient-facing services, we'd of course have engagement requirements as part of that. We'd have to talk to patients to understand if that was definitely going to work for them. Now, in the meantime, there have been lots of developments nationally, and there's a very big national programme, and a very big theme of the NHS 10-year plan is about neighbourhood working. So it's about how services wrap around local neighbourhoods to provide proactive, preventative and good quality services in a local level. And part of that national drive is about setting up neighbourhood health centres. So before we finish our options appraisal, we're expecting in the next few weeks, imminently, though it's outside of our control, it's national guidance, we are waiting for more guidance about what the national vision is for neighbourhood working and this national vision about neighbourhood health centres. And there will be some funding attached at a national level for delivering neighbourhood health centres. So we do want to make sure before we make any final decisions, we're really sighted on all of that and we factor that into our decision making as well. So I think that's our introduction, and then I can come, hopefully that gives a bit of context for answering some of the questions, if that's okay, Chair.
I think it does, yes. So what's the best way to do this? Did members have any preferences as to which questions they were absolutely burning to get an answer to, or should we work through roughly from, we don't necessarily need to go into a huge amount of detail on every one, and we can lump some of them together. So perhaps we could start at the top then and just, I guess you've answered this to a certain extent, but is there still a commitment for a health hub in Biggleswade, or would it not look like that?
So the former hub programme was led by Central Bedfordshire Council and Bedfordshire Clinical Commissioning Group. So that was two organisations before this integrated care board. You'll appreciate we go through a lot of change in the NHS, and we've certainly got a lot going on at the moment as well. But that whole programme was all around enabling more integrated working between services and good quality services close to home. And we're still really committed to that objective, that objective of what we want to be different for patients. But as I've explained, we confirmed from the work in 2024 that it's not affordable for either the council or the ICB to redevelop the community hospital site, which had been part of that vision sort of 8-10 years ago. So our focus now is very much on making the best use of our existing resources and any funding opportunities that come along. But like I say, our main focus is on how we can make best use of this large area of the health centre that's going to become vacant, and continuing to work with the Salamanca group about how we provide additional capacity in the long term. So we're still committed to the objectives. We still want to achieve those outcomes for local people, but very much the national and local focus is on how can you best achieve those outcomes using your existing assets first.
So that would be a redevelopment of the existing Saffron Road site? Just because
In part, yeah.
In part, what would the other parts be?
We're also looking at potentially some services that cover the whole of the Ivor Valley area, moving from the Biggleswade Community Hospital site to, an empty area of Sandy Health Centre, for example.
Okay, but overall an increase in capacity and services being delivered at a more local level, keeping that ambition?
Not necessarily an increase in capacity. Our prime focus at the moment is about putting services in the right places where staff and patients can be supported to receive high quality care.
Okay. Councillor Tranter.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the straightforward answer to that question. It's going to raise more questions, I'm sure, but I've picked up on the commentary there that there is potential for moving other services potentially to a vacant part of a health centre in Sandy. I'm aware that there's a lot goes on at the Biggleswade Hospital site. One of the things that does concern me, given the population growth and housing growth that's coming in the Biggleswade area specifically, forget anything else that's going on across the Ivor Valley, I'm talking about Biggleswade and Biggleswade resident concerns, is those services moving north to Sandy and the biggest hub in this part of the area, forcing parents and people who require other services to travel to Sandy. It feels like a retroactive step to me.
Well, and anything that we propose would be subject to patient engagement. So we would expect to hear from we would go out to service users to understand the impact. But the services we're talking about cover right over to Shefford, Ampthill, Flitwick. So many patients are already having to travel to Biggleswade anyway to access those. And it'll be quite a small proportion that are specifically from Biggleswade accessing those services. So we do have to look at it in the round. At the moment, we do have services operating from buildings where the heating stops working for half of the year. And we have empty space sitting there in buildings that are of a really good condition, but comparatively. So we do have to start, in a situation where public sector finances are constrained, we do have to think about how we make best use of our existing facilities. But like I say, nothing would be decided without hearing from patients first.
Councillor Whitaker.
You mentioned finances there at the end, and you mentioned there's 3.66 from Land East. We've got Land North of Furzon Hall Road coming forward at some point sooner rather than later, I suspect. We've already had King's Reach, which had a promise of a health centre back in the day and never got one. There is a lot of capital funding there. And let's not forget, there's also a lot of capital funding comes from government that unfortunately does seem to get kind of soaked up by our hospitals rather than ending up in primary care. So Biggleswade is absorbing a lot of housing and providing a lot of Section 106. What are the government and the ICB putting forward in terms of capital funding? Because they do get some money.
We do, but sadly, it's probably less than any member of the public would expect that we receive. So for the last few years, the ICB has received a total capital budget for primary care services for the whole of Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes of £2 million a year. That doesn't build you one GP surgery even across that huge area. We've got 123 premises across that patch that capital funding has to stretch, across improve. And in fact, half of it has been used on GPIT costs, because that budget also has to cover the cost of laptops, computers, etc. for GP practices. So, like I say, the budget is very limited that we receive for primary care capital. Now, there's some good news in that we have recently received 4-year capital allocations for, so that helps, because for quite a few years, we've only been told what our capital budget was by about April, and we had to spend it by the following April. It makes it very difficult to plan long term and take forward big strategic projects. This time we've got a 4-year budget, which is really helpful. We have similar levels of capital available for primary care, but the ICB will also be receiving a larger strategic capital budget. Again, across the whole of Central East. So this is Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Luton, Milton Keynes. That's a £10 million a year budget, but that is new additional funding. It's not guaranteed to come to the ICB. It can be taken back to provider trusts. So that's a decision that gets made by NHS England. And we're just in the process at the moment of, obviously, we've only just started working with our colleagues in Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire, and we're just trying to go through a process of putting some proposals together for how that funding could be used over the next few years.
Do you want to reply, Councillor Whitaker, and then I'll come to Councillor Russell?
So I get the £2 million a year, and it's great, as you said, that you've got a longer funding window now, because it means you can plan and be more strategic in the way that you take things forward. But you said 2 million for primary CapEx. What's the big picture CapEx funding that you get? And should we actually be talking to someone like our MP so that he can at government level be saying, actually, we don't want just 2 million in primary care, because our greatest need, as you've pointed out, is in primary care and community facilities. And therefore, we need to be redistributing that money that's coming to the ICB in a slightly different way. So what does the whole package look like rather than just the primary care package?
Well, what we could do after this meeting, if you like, is send you detailed link to the capital guidance that's just been published in November. I think a response from the Department for Health would probably be along the line, of course, I can't speak for them, but I think a response from them would be along the lines of, they're pleased that they're making longer term commitments, because that does help with the planning. They are making this new budget available to ICBs for strategic capital, which is going to be really helpful. It's still it's a drop in the ocean of what we really need, but it's helpful. But they have also made money available for provider trusts to bid for something called return to constitutional standards and left shift. But there are buckets of funding. Some are for urgent and emergency care. One is for community services, one is for mental health services, and for cancer and a few other areas. So there are possibly, you could argue, well, Department for Health could argue there are more pots of funding available for providers to bid against this year than there have previously been. Also, nationally, they are holding back £50 million a year capital that will be for delivering the first neighbourhood health centres this Parliament. So that'd be 50 million each year for the next 4 years, about 200 million in total. And they want to use that to deliver the first 40 to 50 neighbourhood health centres across the country by repurposing existing buildings. So again, the national rhetoric is very much about, they recognise there isn't enough money to build all the new buildings that perhaps locally people consider would be valuable. But there is a big focus on delivering neighbourhood health centres through repurposing of existing buildings. And we want to see what opportunities that could bring for us.
And can I just ask, would there be is there a plan to bid for an urgent care centre, for example, for Biggleswade? Because I know that residents will be very keen to see better access, out of hours access to healthcare, because at the moment, quite frankly, it's appalling.
The honest answer is no, that's not a proposal. I don't know, Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about urgent care?
So I actually say that there are no plans for bidding for an urgent care centre in Biggleswade. I mean, if there is out of hours primary care provision provided for Biggleswade through the 111 service, and there is actually a physical base in Biggleswade. Always happy to hear feedback from patients if they're finding that the services aren't meeting their needs. But yeah, at that moment there's no plans to bid for an urgent care facility there.
I'll come to Councillor Russell, then Councillor Strawn in a moment. Just for those who are perhaps a little bit more in the know, what's an example of urgent care, and what would you have to do at the moment? So if you had an emergency, does anyone have an example? I'm just curious. I had a blood test recently and had to go to Bedford. It wasn't urgent, but it wasn't much fun. Councillor Tranter?
So good example is you've been caught poorly or unwell. You're not unwell enough to visit an accident emergency department, but you do need to see preferably a GP or at least a senior nurse for good reason, and no provision locally. If there's no GP appointments, there's no GP appointments. So an urgent care centre would effectively enable you to walk in and wait for an appointment, or call 111 and wait to be referred over there. At the moment, our only option is Bedford. So for people that do not have cars, it is almost impossible by public transport to access.
Right. And if I were having, so say my heart rate rose to 100 and something beats a minute or something like that, or, you know, I'd suffered a what appears to be a small stroke, you know, you 999, or you go and clog up A&E.
But to be fair, that would definitely not be managed in an urgent care centre. That would be managed in an A&E department.
Okay. All right. I'm just trying to understand the level that we're talking on here in terms of urgent care. But it certainly sounds like if we're going over to Bedford, then that's less than ideal. And that's me putting it politely. Councillor Russell, Councillor Strong.
I'm going back on something that was said earlier, first of all. We're told that the community services at the health centre will be vacating. Where are they vacating to? Where will people be able to access those? And this idea that, yes, not everybody would come from Biggleswade, so we've got facilities at Shefford, we've got facilities at Sandy. It comes back to what Councillor Tranter has just been saying. If people haven't got a car, they find it very difficult or expensive because they have to take a taxi. And I've had somebody moan at me regularly about not being able to get chiropody services unless they go to Shefford. And they are not very mobile. They're 80 plus and find it very difficult. So it's a nice idea to think about the future concept of neighbourhood health centres, but actually Biggleswade being the size it is now and growing rapidly needs these facilities in Biggleswade. And I can't see from what you're saying that we're going to get them in even the medium term future.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'll put mine on. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been trying to get my head around some of the figures here and all the proposals, and some of it isn't adding up because we were told, I think it was something like 2.5 million to keep the existing facility at the health centre up in current hospital up to date. So that needs to be factored into the financing of it. And item 2 on the questions was about the planning application for that site, because if I'm understanding it, it seems possible that they're trying to move facilities from the current hospital site down to Saffron Road. That would free up X million, I would anticipate, if it was developed. So I'm not sure that the figures are all adding up, or at least I don't understand how the figures are adding up and being explained. So I think we're also supporting a lot of the local area outside Biggleswade, in addition to Biggleswade patients who are struggling to get seen on a regular basis. So I don't understand all the mathematics and things about how this is working and what kind of creative thinking is going into the budgeting process. And I think it'd be quite helpful if at some stage we could actually see examples of how much each alternative is costing and why, and the sources of funding, taking into account Section 106 monies.
Should we just touch on that specifically then? Because you've hit something quite important there with question 2. So it looks like in the call for sites, the Biggleswade Hospital, the current site, wants to come forward for housing. Is that the plan?
So some of the options that we're considering at the moment could result in moving all of the services off of the community hospital site. And just to explain this gentleman's question about the 2.5 million figure, that's the estimated figure by the company that the organisation that run that site, NHS Property Services. That's the figure that they say they should have spent on the maintenance of that site for its upkeep, that they haven't been able to afford to. That's what backlog maintenance means. So that's and they don't have that funding to spend. So that's why the condition of that site is not getting any better anytime soon. So some of the options could involve moving out all of the services off. And then one option in that scenario would be the potential to dispose of the community hospital site, to develop, to produce extra capital funding that could be reinvested in a better value for money solution. But I will stress that is by no means a done deal. That's not a decision that's been made. I say it's still subject to the options appraisal that we're doing at the moment. But by NHS Property Services, the owner of that site, including when the Central Bedfordshire Council call for sites came out for developing the local plan, you get that window of opportunity every sort of 5 to 10 years for landowners to put forward sites that they think could be brought forward for housing development, potentially for it to be considered in the local plan. If you don't bring forward the site at that stage, then it's treated as a speculative development. And actually it can be very hard to bring forward planning permission for it. So it's been included to keep all options open, because as you say, there is something about setting out all of the options, what they would cost, what value they would bring. And we have to be pragmatic. And one option on the table is to sell that site and develop, create extra money for the NHS that can be reinvested in a better quality solution. But it's not a done deal.
Thank you. Councillor Strawn, you wanted to respond
Coming
briefly?
back on the question of the different ownerships, my concern there is if the hospital site was redeveloped, does that money go to the ICB to actually create another additional facility, or is that just goes back into the general pot of the Hospital Properties Board? So is that lost effectively to Biggleswade if that site is sold?
That's a very perceptive question. NHS Property Services are part of the NHS family, but they're not the same organisation as the ICB. There's a national policy that if any of their sites are disposed of, then 50% of the proceeds of the sale have to be reinvested back into the local community for the ICB to decide how that gets spent. But it has to be spent on a property that NHSPS has a legal interest in. So we have to do all sorts of fancy footwork to make sure that if we were to support freeing up a site for disposal, that we maximise the value of what's invested back locally.
I'll come to you both in a moment. How local is local? Luton's kind of local, isn't it? But Biggleswade is more local. Would it have to be in the Ivor Valley area?
Technically it wouldn't have to be. So the guidance is it could be reinvested anywhere in Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes. But for us to take such a big step, we would be wanting to wrap that up with a business case that suggests, that the benefit would be would be felt by this local community.
Okay. That offers some reassurance, I think. Councillor Strawn, then Councillor Whitaker.
Just following on from that, my concern is it gets even more alarming by the second in terms of what we're hearing, but we'd only get 50% back for the local area, whatever the local area is. What happens to the other 50%? Because it sounds as though it's going into national pot where we lose out. This is not acceptable to me, and I don't think it'll be acceptable to any of us around this table.
No. Councillor Whitaker.
Yeah, my understanding is 50% goes back to government, 50% gets kept locally. However, I also understand that we can apply, or we can lobby for dispensation to keep 100% of that money. So I suppose one question, and that might come back to question 11.
Yeah.
How can we support, and that might be something we want to write to our MP about, making sure that we get 100% of that. And just to also add, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but the money from that site isn't as big as you think, and actually it isn't millions and millions of pounds. It really isn't. It's a relatively modest amount of money that it would generate on the open market. So I don't think it's going to be the answer to all of our prayers. If I'm brutally honest, it's like taking the words out of your mouth, but I don't think it is. But yeah, I think there is a way to get more money but out of it than just the 50% is what I wanted to just answer and bring back. Can I just also come back to the Saffron site, the Saffron Road site? I mean, I think we all really like, we've all got a lot of affection for our two GP surgeries. I think it's fair to say Saffron Road is very site constrained. That isn't going to change. And that, I think, has always been a concern for the GPs and the people that work out of there, as well as the ICB and as well as us as councillors and residents. So there's a limit to how much it can grow. So what's the logic in investing in a building that is in quite a poor state of repair as it currently stands, in a site constrained location? I mean, on one hand, I'd say it's great because access from public transport and it's central and it's great. But on the other hand, I think, is it a bit like putting 2.5 million into the Biggleswade Hospital site when we know it's already in a very poor state of repair?
Well, technically, it's in a much better state of condition than Biggleswade Community Hospital, but then we're setting quite a low bar with the community. But no, but it is in perfectly adequate condition for delivering healthcare services. And investment into a refurbishment of that building would improve its condition significantly as well. I think the challenge we have is, in an absolutely perfect world, I think we would probably all love to scoop up services from where they're based now, put them into one integrated focal point for the community, having primary care, community, mental health services, and potentially social care presence all in one integrated facility. And unfortunately, the work we've done shows we just can't afford that anytime soon. And we've seen what our allocation looks like for the next 4 years. We can't afford that. So we are in the realms of having to work creatively and trying to think what are the best options at our disposal to meet our objectives of sustainable primary care services, offering enough appointments for local people, and we're helping to integrate services and to grow and transform our services. So the option, the opportunity that's facing us at the moment, and just to address this lady's concerns, the services that are coming, the people that are coming out of Biggleswade Health Centre later this year are not delivering any services to, it's not where patients are seeing them. They are administrative staff that are based there, and they will be consolidating into an admin base in Sheffield. So using some empty space there, using that more wisely, which frees up space that can be used for more patient services in Biggleswade. And we think it's a really pragmatic option to try and max out, whilst we're stuck paying for that building for the foreseeable, we want to use it for best benefit for local people. And that's what our current options appraisal.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to look to conclude now. I guess I just have one last question. So it looks like there is some change coming, although you've obviously heard from councillors about some of the challenges that we're facing. And I totally understand the budget constraint, but also it's quite clear that the kind of change that Biggleswade is crying out for is not coming anytime soon. The change that is coming, though, are there likely to be consultations on that? And how can councillors feed into this to provide as much local knowledge as possible so that when you are making decisions, they are as well informed as they can be with the backing of elected representatives?
That's a really helpful question. Thank you. So when we do conclude the options appraisal, we'll then have to assess if there are engagement. If we're planning to move any patient-facing services, then we have to plan what the engagement looks like around that. And we would expect to talk to the overview and scrutiny committee at the council about what level of engagement they would expect of us as well, to hold us to account for, making sure we're engaging with local people appropriately. I'm sure we would be more than happy to come back and have a conversation nearer the time in a few months around the conclusion of the options appraisal. And as this gentleman said, to be transparent with you about the options we're considering in an unideal world where we don't have all the resources that we would like to deliver all the things we would like, the options we're considering to make the best of what we do have available.
Thank you. And I think we are very grateful for you coming along and being as transparent as you have been tonight. It has been eye-opening, and I think we would appreciate you coming back when the options appraisal is done. I see Councillor Daniels is signaling. Is it a very quick question?
It's a really quick question, thank you. I know the plan was to go through all the questions, the 1 to 11. I don't think we touched on the Ivor Medical Centre or what plans are in place for improved dental and pharmaceutical provision in Biggleswade. Are you able to quickly answer that, please?
Yeah.
In truth, it's probably not a quick answer, but we'd be really happy to provide a written update within the next week or two to members of the council.
I'll circulate that if that's all right, because that is a whole nother discussion, isn't it? And we probably need to meet with Ivor Medical Centre as members as well. So, Councillor Whitaker, did you have one?
Chair, could I just ask, can we have, it sounds like you've got answers for all of our questions, whether if you have those as written answers, whether they could be circulated perhaps to members?
I think so.
Because I think that would be useful.
Let's do that. So if we'll minute that, please, Asia, that would be great. So thank you so much again for coming along. You don't need to stay for the rest of our meeting, but thank you for coming in person and for joining online. And we look forward to being back in touch when the options appraisal is done, and we'll welcome you back here and have another conversation. So thank you again. Thank you. Item 5, I'm moving back to minutes of previous meetings. Receive and approve a correct record of the minutes of the last joint committee. I'm on page 7. Any comments on page 7? We're going through these firstly for accurate. We'll go through for accuracy, then we'll do matters arising. So accuracy, page 7, page 8, page 9. Is focus is spelt properly on item 7? Is it 1S or 2? Okay, well, I won't be pedantic, sorry. That was the only thing I spotted on page 9. Page 10. Oh, I have one on page 10. Ian Berry with I-A-I-N. That's the only change there. Anything else on page 10? Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. No, are we happy that these are a reasonable record? Is that okay? Yep. Item 6, matters arising, same set of minutes, matters arising. Page 7, page 8, page 9. I can update on 7A, CBC call for sites. Sorry, Councillor Alban.
So on item 7A, the CBC call for sites. So there was a request to get some information from CBC. Has that?
Yes, so I've been in touch with the team that are leading the local plan at Central Beds. It's not yet ready to be considered because officers are still going through the 600 and something sites. I understand there has been a change in national guidance that is affecting the sort of plan and the path that Central Beds had laid out. So they're slightly into contingency time, but they will be consulting soon. So we will bring this as soon as it's ready, I hope by the next meeting. If not, it is coming to joint committee so that we can comment. Anything else on page 9? No. Page 10. I have a matter arising. Sorry, was somebody signalling? No. I have a matter arising on whatever that is, 9A. So I'm halfway down where we resolved to contact CBC highways, particularly around Hitchin Street, Potham Road and London Road being priority areas. So I have contacted the highways team. They've confirmed that they don't have capacity or budget to price up how much repairs would cost on those roads. However, ward members are expecting to have sessions with officers in due course. So we can raise this again then. I will also ask CBC officers, if they can't afford it this year, take note, because when your next year's plan comes round, hopefully you will have a budget to do that work then, because those roads are the priority for Biggleswade. So that is the conversation that's been had. Is that okay? Anything else on page 10, matters arising? Page 11, Councillor Russell.
It says that members noted that the points on Ivor Valley, noted the points on Ivor Valley and agreed that the Town Council would respond in December. Just to clarify for non-Town Council members of the committee that the final decision on response to the consultation was taken on Tuesday night, and there'll be a letter going out in due course, as well as responding to the form that was requested to be filled in.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Russell. Anything else on page 11? No. Page 12, matters arising. Sarah? Microphone.
I should have mentioned earlier, I was a bit behind. I do have a requested change to the minutes, actually, in terms of the Ivor Valley item.
Okay.
If I may, just to ensure accuracy, which I can read out. It was.
Which paragraph are we in?
There's a bit about the preferred option.
So the preferred option being 1B?
So yes, option B was recommended as the split site arrangement provided flexibility. However, following engagement and feedback, the member working group saw some clear benefits for option 1A. But I can't find that in these.
It's because I removed it, I think.
Minutes.
It's because I removed it before it came.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Thank you.
It's all right. Matters arising. So sorry, there was an initial draft of the minutes. and there was a comment in there that I don't think was quite accurate. So I removed it when I went through and checked the minutes before they came. It addresses Sarah's point. So Sarah is just referring to an earlier draft.
Sorry.
Probably there were lots of emails bouncing back and forwards, but then that's not in this paper. Okay, matters arising, page 12. Community governance review. Item D, the consultation is still ongoing. I have formally responded. I copied ward councillors and Councillor Russell. And that's on the community governance review consultation, excuse me. And then page 13, any matters arising? No. Okay. I am moving on. Item 7, outstanding action. So members to receive and consider the following outstanding action item. So this is related to a working group with the developers to the east of Biggleswade. This is an item on this agenda, so we will discuss that shortly. Item 9, 9A, A1 underpass. For members to receive and consider a report from Councillor Russell. So Councillor Russell, I think we have read the report. Do you want to introduce it briefly? Is there anything new or change that you want to add? Then we'll go to discussion.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a few points I would like to add, and then I would like to suggest a change to the recommendation 2 in my report.
Of course.
In light of some of the information that's come forward since I wrote the report. I think the first thing that I want to highlight here is that this will not move forward unless Central Bedfordshire Council makes it a formal policy to want the underpass, because it's only Central Bedfordshire Council that can deal with national highways. You've got the response at Appendix A of when the Town Council wrote to National Highways on behalf of Biggleswade and Northill Parish Council, and it's effectively saying that they won't deal with us in a lot of words. They do also mention that a feasibility study is necessary. And that's one of the things that we want to get done. Officers from Central Beds have put some items forward, and I would like to just go through one or two of those that are in Appendix C. It says that CBC recognises the need for a crossing, but officers are still saying there needs to be an option appraisal between a crossing and a bridge. We've heard from Mr. Wells that actually a bridge is not as was proposed for the £3 million from the Woodlands developer. It would need to be much more complicated, including lifts on the bridge for disabled people. So the cost of that would go a lot higher, which makes the cost of a bridge much more in the region of the cost of an underpass. There's also been a lot of communication between Northill Parish Council and their residents, which can be brought forward as evidence for the need for the crossing. I've just talked about the fact that CBC need to make it their policy. The council is now taking a stance on, the CBC council is now taking a stance on improvements to the A1 because of the plans to build a new town at Tempsford. Having been part of a study of the A1 for RIS2, which was the Road Infrastructure Survey for 2020 to 2025, there are no easy solutions. It would be possible to do grade separation at Biggleswade South. Grade separation at North or Tempsford is not easy. But whatever happens with the A1, there will still be the problem of crossing from Northill into Biggleswade and vice versa. The bit about the construction impact, item 4 on the CBC officers, I just wanted to refer to something that happened over Christmas, which you may or may not have picked up on. But there was an underpass built on the M27 in Hampshire over the Christmas holiday. And it wasn't an underpass for a bridleway, which is what we're talking about. It was an underpass for a dual carriageway, 4 lanes of traffic. And the underpass was put in place within 4 or 5 days over Christmas. And then there were a few more days to resurface the M27 as it went over. That just shows that can be done. And it's a process called cut and cover, which was used for the tunnel on the Baldock bypass, which was used for this M27, which is being talked about for an underpass between Northern and Biggleswade. That M27 underpass was felt necessary for the building of a new housing development of 40,000 houses. It cost £100 million, £100 million for 40,000 houses. We may be looking at 40,000 houses at Tempsford. That's what the government are talking about, up to. £10 million possibly is the figure, the highest figure I've been given for an underpass on the A1 for us. So that sounds like a much better deal than 100 million for 40,000 houses in Hampshire. And I think we need to realise that. And we also need to take account of the impact on Hill Lane and the rising amounts of traffic there, and what needs to happen to relieve that build-up of traffic. So there are quite a few issues there. And I'd just like to highlight also some design principles that are in LTN 120, which was referred to earlier, which is the government policy for active travel. And the guidance on underpasses is supported also by the inclusive mobility guidelines. The design thing is that they should be short, wide and direct. There's the safety perception, and I know some people say an underpass wouldn't be safe, but it lists here quite clearly, and I won't go through it all, but the actions that should be taken in designing the underpass, which would make it much safer. And interestingly, underpasses should also be suitable for equestrian use, which has an impact on the height, and they reckon the height of an underpass should be quite deep anyway, because it's safer. We've heard that it's not that Active Travel England were not at all happy with the Woodlands proposal. We've also heard that planning inspectors were not happy with building just outside Ickwell because there wasn't sufficient access to Biggleswade. So 2 different planning inspectors have refused planning permission for that reason. So there are quite a lot of issues going on here, but I think I'll stop at that point, except to say that having read what Central Beds officers have said and thought about it more, I think the recommendation 1 to request that an underpass become formal CBC policy, that is the first crucial thing that needs to happen. Recommendation 3, that CBC press government at every opportunity for improvements to the A1, including the underpass. But for recommendation 2, that CBC urge National Highways to do a feasibility study, or Active Travel England to fund the feasibility study, because there is extra money, not just that allocated to Central Beds, for what's included, the samples of which are included in the papers here. There is extra Active Travel England funding. So CBC needs to lead on this and ask for National Highways or Active Travel in England to do a feasibility study, which will show exactly what can or cannot be done. There are very clear guidelines in LTN 120, and there is no reason why this should not go ahead. And to say that the working group is not expecting it to happen overnight, but if we don't start to put things forward. I mean, for instance, one of the Central Beds officers said that they're preparing the local transport plan, which won't be ready for consultation until early next year. That's fine, but what they didn't say was we could put the underpass into that local transport plan. Why not? If it's Central Beds policy, it could go into that and then follow the process through. So what we're asking tonight is that this committee writes to the relevant people in Central Beds. There's 2 portfolio holders. There's the portfolio holder for highways and the portfolio holder for active travel, and the relevant officers who support those cabinet members. and urge them first along the lines of the recommendations to take this on board, take it forward for us, talk to National Highways, talk to Active Travel England, and get a feasibility study done.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. So your proposals then, recommendations 1 and 3 remain the same.
Yes.
Number 2 changes to say that
for CBC to urge National Highways and/or Active Travel England to do a feasibility study.
Right, so the wording is the same, we're just adding in and/or National Highways. Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Strawn is seconding. Okay, would anyone like to speak? Councillor Strawn, you're indicating.
Just an observation, if we're sending this letter, may I suggest that we also copy in our MP so that he's aware of what's going on, because it affects his whole constituency in effect, as being with the Thamesford development. It's all part and parcel. The impact's going to be down here, but I think our MP ought to be aware of it. So I think if we could include copying him in on that, I think that'd be appropriate.
Okay.
As Chairman, that's very appropriate, because in the past, our MP has convened groups which people around this table have attended, and it got to the point where it was an impasse because our Highways Authority wasn't taking it forward.
Understood. Any further comments? Councillor Daniels, you were signalling, and then I'll come to Councillor Tranter. Do you want to speak, Councillor Daniels?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I obviously fully support everything that Councillor Russell has said. I think she's covered everything. Mr. Wells spoke very eloquently about what is also required. I don't want us to go down the track again of discussing a bridge, because that's been discussed, and as a Biggleswade joint committee with Northern Parish Council, all the options have been gone through, and it's been well established that the residents' preferred route is an underpass. Northern Parish Council's is as well, and so is the joint committee. Very much for it. We're a couple of years down the line, with a lot of people been doing a lot of work. We've established that a bridge is not fit for purpose. Show me a bridge that would work. I don't think anybody can. Underpass is the way, and I fully support what Councillor Russell is putting forward.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor Daniels. Just for those who are unaware, when Councillor Daniels refers to a joint committee, what I think you mean is the working group between Norville Parish Council and Biggleswade Town Council, who've been working in the background, who provided this paper. Councillor Tranter.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to dive in with a little bit of context, because there's a lot of talk around new towns and Thamesford and impact, but the reality is there's more to it than just that in this region. You know, we have to take into account Universal Studios. We cannot ignore the impact of that on the roads and the A1. We know we have consent for around 2,000 homes coming to Biggleswade. The call for sites and the available land means there is more than that imminently. So in a moment of tech geekery, I referred to ChatGPT very recently and asked it to act as a travel planner to look at modelling the impact of all of what we can see in sight for the next 10 years on the A1. I can't verify because I'm not qualified, but I can tell you it thinks that that will equate to an extra 10,000 vehicles at Biggleswade South and North every hour during peak times, with a 35% burst capacity at weekends and bank holidays. That is not an unsubstantial amount of traffic for a road that is already crushed with traffic at peak times to cope with. So when we talk about need for mitigations, that urgency is going to come forward really fast.
To work harder and buy a helicopter. Councillor Whitaker.
I might need a helicopter too. I'm afraid I'm going to be a bit of a Debbie Downer on this one. I totally support the idea of a crossing at that location. I don't think anybody could argue against it. I think it's very, very clear that it's needed. I'm not convinced that it needs to be an underpass rather than a bridge. And I haven't been part of the working group meeting, so I don't know all the conversations that have been had. Although I have been part of some of the meetings with Richard Fuller, as you're aware. I do look at Lindsell's Crossing and say that's ramps. In terms of accessibility for residents, I've not had any complaints in terms of people not being able to use it. It is further because of the ramps, I'll give you that. And it's pretty ugly as well, if I'm brutally honest. But also, I know in terms of the costs of doing it as a ramp rather than going under the railway, I remember we saw the costs at the time and there was like a threefold difference in costs. It was hugely different in costs. And so I have to put my kind of sensible head on and say, as much as an underpass looks better, and I can see why if I was cycling I'd rather go under an underpass in a short little wide route than have to go up a ramp. I can see I totally up for that because I don't want to have to cycle up a ramp. I totally can see that. I also have to think the costs are going to be different, and we know it's a floodplain area. We know it's going to need pumps, and I look in terms of maintenance. And I'm looking at my councillors to this side of me and thinking about Alsey, which has a similar underpass pump situation that I know fails all the time. And in terms of maintenance, whenever it rains, the kids can't even get to school in Alsey because they can't get under the underpass because it's flooded because of how often the pump fails. So I'm not convinced by the argument for it having to be an underpass versus a bridge. Because I'm just not sure if the cost benefit analysis has really been done. In terms of option 2, recommendation 2, you're asking the funding allocated to CBC to be used for this feasibility study, but you've also mentioned Tempsford in the same breath. And I think that's important because I wonder, and I don't know, but I do wonder if the work around Tempsford, I know that we have passed motions at Central Bedfordshire Council saying about dealing with the A1 as part of the Tempsford, asking the government to look at the A1 as part of the Tempsford development. And if that's the case, does that mean that as part of the Tempsford development, they would also do this piece of work on this underpass, bridge, whatever we want it to be, on this crossing for this particular area? And therefore, if we use the money that we've got now from active travel, does that mean we're potentially stopping, for example, the Biggleswade active travel corridor being funded with the same money? So I have to kind of say, well, actually, I'm not sure that I can support options, recommendation 2 for that reason, because we could be taking money out of the pot now that could be funded by a completely different route within the next couple of years. So again, I'm struggling with that. I totally agree with 3. We should impress at every opportunity that there's a crossing at the A1, but I'm struggling to do as an underpass at the moment.
I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Russell. I think, may I just try to answer a couple of these comments, Councillor Whitaker? So my understanding is that there was a planning application which is just to the south of the current small industrial development in Upper Caldicot. It's not really that small, it's a great little development. Just to the south of that, part of the 106 was, I think, about £2 million for a bridge. I read 2 in the documents online, but we're talking 2 to 3 million. Okay, that's the ballpark figure. Yeah, 2 to 3 million. That would have constructed the bridge. Active Travel England came back and they had a series of concerns, one of which was around the width of the bridge. The other was on the fact that it had steps in it. There were a few other things in there as well. So they did push back on those concerns around a bridge. My understanding is that the developer would be willing to make a contribution to. They don't really care whether their contribution goes towards a bridge or an underpass, but their contribution would, at least at the time, have covered a bridge, one that Active Travel England weren't happy with, but a bridge. If we were looking at an underpass, realistically, we're looking at funding, presumably from national government, I suspect. And is that a fair comment? Because it would be because we're obviously looking at more like 10 million rather than 3, and the developer's not going to give 10. So, Councillor Russell, please.
First of all, Councillor Whitaker referred to the Lindsell Bridge. LTN 120 makes a distinction between leisure use and utility use. Now, the underpass that we're talking about under the A1 would come under utility use. Lindsell's Bridge comes under leisure because it's for the green wheel. Utility use requires that it is fully accessible to everybody. The chairman's just said Active Travel England didn't like the bridge that was being proposed by the developers of Woodlands. No, because the ramps were too steep and they would have to have lifts. So there would be an ongoing maintenance cost for the lifts, which would probably equal the maintenance cost for pumps. So there's problems on both sides there. There would have to be lifts for mobility scooters. You couldn't, even on the more shallow ramp. This is all in LTN 120.
Sorry, but have Active Travel England said there need to be lifts?
Yes, it's in LTN 120.
No, but has Active Travel England said you need to have lifts on this
not in
bridge?
response to that, but it's in the government's policy, LTN 120, that you have to have lifts on a utility bridge. It is there. So, you know, there are comparable costs on both sides. The bridge would probably cost more like 5 million. We've been told possibly 5 to 10 million. It's also being said, there are two different things here. What I'm now proposing for recommendation to is that Active Travel England and or National Highways are asked to do a feasibility study completely separate from the money that Central Beds already get, because they do have money to do things like this. But that will only happen if Central Beds make it policy and Central Beds ask National Highways or Active Travel England to do it.
May I just stress, sorry to interject, yeah. I just want to back up this point. The freedom of information request that you put into Central Beds was very telling. We have not had a penny, as far as I can see, from Active Travel England funding in Biggleswade. Is that fair over the last few years? There's been something in Sandy and Potton and Cycle Route, but there's not been anything for Biggleswade.
The FOI only revealed money in Stopfold for something. Otherwise, there was nothing in East Bedfordshire in that particular answer that was given.
Okay.
So we need Central Beds to support it. We need them to get behind it. I think it's quite likely that there could be government money because of Tempsford. But even if there's not government money because of Tempsford, Active Travel England have pots of money for capital expenditure way outside. I'm not talking about the annual pot for Central Beds now. Mm-hmm. So there is money that could come from government. And Richard Fuller confirmed that 18 months ago, I think, when we were having some of the working groups, he talked to colleagues in the Department of Transport and confirmed that there's money available. So we've got to take this through in logical steps. And the first steps need to be Central Beds to get behind it, to ask for a feasibility to be done by National Highways or Active Travel England, and to continue to press for Tempsford. I mean, what Councillor Tranter has said about the increase in traffic is horrendous. And it means that, I mean, people do cross the A1 because there's footpath 7 there, which stops at the A1, and people do sometimes go across because it's still a right of way across the A1. Yeah. They're not going to do it with an extra, what was it, 10,000 cars per whatever, you know, so we just need to move this forward. And what hasn't been mentioned, because it's been discussed in the working group a long while ago, is that there are benefits, obviously, for Northern and Caldicot people coming into Biggleswade, but there are benefits for people in Biggleswade because people in the north of Biggleswade, and with the Land North development to come, so the Fairfield Estate and Land North, if commercial development goes ahead in Woodlands over and above what is there, those jobs are closer than Stratton Business Park. Mm-hmm. So it could provide jobs for Biggleswade as well as access to the countryside.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I'm going to move to a vote in a few minutes. Oh, we've got Councillor Strawn. Do you want to come in, and then I'll go to Sam, and then I'll go to Councillor Daniels. Councillor Strawn.
Thank you. I think the feasibility study is absolutely necessary because I refer to Appendix A, and it says in there, and this is from National Highways, However, to provide a rough ballpark figure would be anywhere from 1 million to 10 million pounds. Now, may not be the 1 million, but until we've done the feasibility study, none of us can know what the cost is. It could be cheaper than a bridge. It may be more expensive than the bridge, but without the feasibility study, we don't know. But these are National Highways' own figures about the cost of an underpass. So in that respect, a feasibility study is the way forward, and see what comes out. Unless we do that, we might be saving money by having the underpass, not increasing the cost.
Thank you, Councillor Strawn. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to pose the thought that considering Universal Studios, if this is quite an urgent issue with the bridge or underpass, should we then consider the time required to receive the funding and also to put into place the measure compared to the time when the issue with Universal Studios will arise?
Yes, I think that's very important actually, because to Councillor Russell's point, you know, when did we start this conversation? 18 months ago? I think I might have been a town councillor when Northville Parish Council representatives came here. So actually starting now and getting ahead, whatever the outcome may be, is imperative to get infrastructure in place, at least sequence with development, preferably before. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Councillor Daniels, and then I'm going to look to move to a vote.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to come back to a couple of points that Councillor Whitaker has mentioned, because she does prefer a bridge, and I appreciate that. However, a lot of us have been working on it for quite a longer time, and we've got to know what things are acceptable and what are not acceptable. But what I would like to let everybody know is that if we had a bridge on a round trip, you're going to probably end up walking about 800 more meters than you were if you had an underpass. Because with an underpass, you're going to go into it and you're going to go under the road or wherever, and you're going to arrive at the other side. With the bridge, you're going to be looking at things like deceleration zones. You're going to have to separate pedestrians and cyclists. You're going to have to put a roof on it so it comes in line with the legislation. But because of the ramps and how long it needs to be because of deceleration zones, it's going to put about another 800 meters on it on a round trip. Now, who's going to use that?
Thank you. Councillor Whitaker, yes, you were named, that's fine.
Sorry, I totally get what you're saying. And in terms of what's desirable, I agree. An underpass is more desirable for the residents. But being pragmatic, it's about not just about desirability. I think when Lindsell's Crossing came about, we all wanted it to go under the railway line. Nobody wanted a bridge. We've got a bridge because of the cost. So I'm trying to be a little bit pragmatic rather than just saying, what do we want? So, and it's interesting because Councillor Strawn, the way you were talking about it was the feasibility study is going to compare the cost of the bridge versus the underpass. That's not the way that recommendation is currently worded. Because I could support that and I could say, actually, yes, show me a true comparison of the two side by side done by Active Travel England or the government. Because then at the moment we're talking about lots of things that we don't really know or just throwing out numbers around. I can totally support that. At the moment, that's not how it's written. It's underpass or nothing. And that's where I have a bit of a problem.
Okay. Yeah, in a moment, Councillor Strawn, that's an interesting point, because at the moment, the only figure we know for sure is that the developer felt they could build a bridge for 2.5 million, but that didn't meet standards. So that's not that helpful, right? If we are going to have to bring something up to standards in terms of a bridge, what does that number look like? And then how does that compare to an underpass? Councillor Strawn, do you want to comment? I don't know whether that's worth... We have the recommendations as they are. We can either vote on them or you can take on board what Councillor Whitaker said. It's entirely up to those who've put the proposal down. So, Councillor Strawn, do you want to comment?
I'd like to clarify. I was looking at the feasibility study for the underpass, which was here, and the National Highways were quoting for an underpass as a range, which is supporting Councillor Russell's proposal, was that we get the feasibility studies, how much is it going to cost for the underpass, because we already have a ballpark figure for the bridge.
Okay. Councillor Russell, you're possibly right. Possibly we do have a ballpark figure. So, Councillor Russell, do you want to restate your proposal? And I'm happy to take them all in one go or one at a time, whatever you prefer.
I prefer that they were taken all in one go. And as far as extending the proposal to a feasibility study for a bridge, that is not the optimum solution that those of us who have been working on this for a long while want. And I'd just add that I've also spoken to somebody who is now a consultant for a transport consultancy who used to work for the DFT and is very familiar with the A1. And he didn't give quite such a wide range as 1 to 10 million. He said 5 to 10 million.
Okay.
So if you think about the extra cost of doing a bridge that is a utility bridge that meets the requirements of LTN 120, that's going to be more like 5 million. So, you know, there is some sort of comparison between the two. But all the work that we've been doing in the background, and it's more than 18 months, it's probably over 2 years that we've been looking at all this. We want the underpass, and we would want a feasibility study for the underpass.
Okay. We will take that vote in a moment. I'm going to go to Cliff for the last word.
Thank you, Chair. I really hope this doesn't come across as a distraction, and that's not what's meant at all. It's really just so that we get something recorded in the minutes in relation to the fact that the current Central Beds local plan does include for a bridge south of Biggleswade, if and when Home Farm is comes forward, a query, something I've learned tonight, and this differentiation between the recreation and utility specifications in LTN 120. Just want to make sure that we don't miss a trick when local plan comes forward and need to ensure that the green wheel aspiration for a bridge to the south of the town, or a crossing, sorry, to the south of the town, we need to make sure that we're consistent in our approach.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, we're going to take a vote. So we've debated this extensively. We're taking all 3 recommendations in one go. So it's to request that an underpass become formal CBC policy, to urge that the next tranche of Active Travel England, sorry.
The Central Beds to urge National Highways or Active Travel England to do a feasibility study.
Okay, CBC to urge Active Travel England or National Highways to do a feasibility study. Apologies. And then request that CBC press government at every opportunity for improvements to the A1, including for an underpass. So all those in favour of that proposal, please show. Any against? Any? Thank you, Councillor Whitaker. Any abstentions? Okay, so that's carried. So I will write that email to the relevant officers at Central Bedfordshire and executive members, CCing our MP. Item 9B. I've lost my agenda. That's okay, I've got it. I've got a system here where once I'm done with something, I put it on the floor. Right, and I've been known to put the agenda down there in the past. Sorry, it's been a while, I'm not as used to this anymore. Item 9B, Land East, for members to adopt the terms of reference for the working group for the Land East development. I will introduce this item because there have been some changes over the last few days. So you have in front of you a terms of reference which was drafted by me based on the actions of our meeting with the developers to the east of Biggleswade at the last joint committee under exempt. So I have circulated it with ward councillors, I think. Councillor Russell's seen this as well. Firstly, very happy to take comments, feedbacks, make amendments. We're not bound entirely by what we say this evening. We can always bring it back to future joint committees if we find ways of working a difference. We'll come to in a moment, Councillor Tranter. However, yesterday I had a conversation with the planning officer who is liaising with developers to the east of Biggleswade. They have made clear that their timelines are going to be condensed and start rather quickly in terms of getting detailed designs together. They want input, they want governance and a structure, but they want to meet monthly, and they also have indicated that the town council should provide representatives, and likewise for central beds councillors. So it's a tighter timeline, potentially more decisions in a short space of time rather than something that's perhaps more longer term and strategic. And central beds are in the process of drafting a terms of reference for that. It's currently with Andrew Davey and Jenny Selly to look at. So I don't know the best way that we are going to work going forward, but my suggestion tonight is that we adopt this terms of reference as an interim terms of reference, pending something from Central Bedfordshire. And I think I'm just very mindful that we have 5 Central Bedfordshire councillors in Biggleswade, and to exclude any of them from detailed designs seems like an odd thing to do, particularly when we have 3 different political groups represented across our central beds councillors. So I'm happy to take a steer from members about how we take this. I'd appreciate your thoughts and inputs. I'm sorry this is a very late change. So my proposal, I would suggest, is that we adopt what's in front of us as an interim, but if members have any additions or changes they would like to make or comments, I suggest we take them. So comments, councillors. Councillor Tranter was indicating first. So to you, Councillor Tranter.
Thank you, Chair. So I know we've communicated by email, but I do think it's quite important, and I'm looking over Hayley's shoulder here for the particular wording around member representation. Efforts will be made to ensure that different political groups are represented across the elected members of the working group. I do feel this needs to be stronger than that. I think we need a formal framework to ensure there is cross-party, cross-working group, cross-group representation, unless we find ourselves in a situation where there is only one party around the table entirely. I don't think we should allow that to happen. So I do think if we're going to adopt a terms of reference like this, longer term, we need a proper provision that stops one group of people turning up and running the show. I think that's really important to our residents. I really do. And to your point around your views on the other amendment and the detailed design planning considerations, I also do support an amendment to this. Finally, if we're going to make it an interim, what is that and how do we bind it?
Good question. Can I take those one at a time? So do you have some wording that you'd like to propose to change what's been drafted for this sentence? So I'm in the section, for those who are following, member representation, it's that final sentence, efforts will be made to ensure different political groups are represented. Do you have wording that you'd like to add, Councillor Tranter?
You'd think I would, right?
I don't know. You check your emails, I propose some.
I'll do that in a second.
Okay, good idea. I'll come back to the interim question in a moment. Let's take more comments. Councillor Russell, then Councillor Alban, then Councillor Strawn.
From what I saw yesterday that suddenly came through about this group being put together by planning to look at the design code, I thought that what was being planned with Salamanca from this joint committee was much more than the design code. So I'm not happy that the two things should be conflated. I think we still need to pursue, under whatever terms of reference we agree in a few minutes, we need to pursue these meetings with Salamanca on a much wider scale. Well, it's Salamanca and Valencia, because Valencia are now the major landholders.
Okay.
So that's the point I wanted to make, that whatever central beds set up is up to them. So you've just said that Andrew Davey and Jenny Selly are going to be putting something together. That's one thing. And if town councillors are invited, then town council will decide who their representatives are, and the same for Central Bedfordshire. So I think they should be separate, even if it means that the two groups are running together. But the other thing you just said is that they want to get on with this quickly. So it's quite possible that the design code group will only meet for between 3 and 6 months, probably at the most. Whereas this is going to be much longer, because I would hope that it would go beyond spades in the ground so that we can monitor what is going on and that what we've discussed actually doesn't get changed at the last minute.
Yeah.
My only comment on the terms of reference is that at the top of page 26, this includes upholding local plan policies, notably SA4. Could we add in there, please, about Biggleswade neighbourhood plan, which has got some detailed comments about various design aspects on new build housing estates.
Yeah.
So I would like the neighbourhood plan to be mentioned, please. So it's those 2 points. I think we mustn't conflate with what planning are doing at Central Bedfordshire. And can we make sure that the neighbourhood plan is mentioned? Thank you.
I'm happy with that if others are. Let's keep going round. Councillor Albin.
Yeah, I was going to ask for more information about what the proposal is from CBC regards the liaison with Salamanca, etc., and what this is. But I think I've just heard it. So it sounds to me like the two should run in parallel. I just wonder if that's acceptable to the developers, that should happen like that.
Yes. So look, their urgent priority is to crack on at breakneck speed, which I understand. We've been delayed for a long time, but it's going to have to be palatable to them, I would say, because if we take them at their word and what they said about genuinely investing in Biggleswade, yes, we'll help get these design codes right, but if they're in it for the long haul, they should hopefully be signing up to something along the lines of this terms of reference as well. So I think we should put it to them, and maybe if I just clarify my language from the chair, then we just adopt these terms of reference as they're currently set out. If something wants to run in parallel, let's have that conversation. So hopefully that clarifies. Councillor Strawn, then Councillor Whitaker.
I'm a bit confused over what Salamanca are proposing with regard to the representation from each council compared to the terms of reference, which seem to be from this joint committee that the membership comes. So are they looking for the town council and Central Beds to appoint representatives in addition, or are they looking at coming from just from the joint committee? I'm a bit confused.
That's okay. So just to be really clear, this email came into my inbox at about 3:10 yesterday. So when I say last minute, it was last minute, and that's no one's fault, because there's a lot of work goes into getting the right parties together to put together a terms of reference. That's absolutely fine. Last time we met with Salamanca Group, we said we need to meet quarterly, have something strategic that oversees, that gets accountability for Biggleswade, that comes back to this committee, and we can push that in any direction we want to, whether that's to Central Beds overview and scrutiny, to executive, to town council committees. That's one thing. Separately then, Central Beds have said, we want to drive something around these design codes. The developers engaged and interested. The town council will be able to appoint 3 representatives, 2 or 3, I think they said, and then ward councillors will be represented as well. So I can see why that's confusing. You still look very confused, Councillor Strawn, but does that clarify?
I think it's looking at a separate committee to the one that we've been referring to on the agenda, if I've understood that correctly.
Yeah, that's what I said, but just like in 4 sentences. Yeah, exactly.
But the working group is for this joint committee, so
yes,
people will be appointed from this joint committee, as we agreed with Salamanca at the last meeting.
Yes, and the accountability comes back here. So there's wording in here that, we are bringing back what was discussed. And, we are appointing people each year after we appoint chairman, deputy chairman. Go on, Councillor Strawn.
Just for the sake of clarity, you're therefore expecting the town council and Central Beds to be appointing separate representatives from outside this meeting. So,
yep. Not to this. Okay.
This committee will appoint the people to the Salamanca working group.
Why did I even bring up the design codes? We are not making any decision on design codes or that parallel working group. That will be a discussion that's dealt with separately. You'll have a proposal that comes to your town council where you can nominate people.
Then you've just clarified what I was asked.
Good. I've handled this exceptionally well. Councillor Whitaker.
Councillor Strawn, if I can help. The design guides are going to look at things like What colour are the roofs? What kind of brick are they made from? What do the pavements look like? What does it look like? I expect from the conversations we had last time that as a committee, we want this bit of leisure. We want a health facility. We want a bit for this. We want a bit for that. And we're looking at a much bigger strategic picture and not just a design guide. So they are completely different things. And I think I agree with Councillor Russell. What we're proposing here is much more strategic, much more long-term and a much bigger thing. So I think you're right, park the design guide one. We won't think about that. A couple of comments. I think the background, if we can add, on the 13th of February 2018, in response to the draft local plan consultation, it resolved by Biggleswade Town Council that the Town Council does support, because I want it to be clear that it wasn't agreed by the Joint Committee. I'll let Councillor Trans come up with his wording on political representation. And then just in terms of working group format and purpose, we will meet with the developers, landowners to the east of Biggleswade. I would say at least quarterly.
I've written those exact words down
because
when I was on the train.
If it's moving at pace, we may want to meet with them more frequently than quarterly.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Tranter. So far I've got 3 changes. So it was resolved by BTC that the Town Council does support. So that's in the background section. We're going to meet at least quarterly, and we're adding in reference to the neighbourhood plan after local plan policy SA4. So that's 3 changes plus potentially 1 more, Councillor Tranter.
Yeah, I'm not saying I didn't read your email, Chair, but I'm also not saying I did.
But you have now.
So yes, so to be clear to the committee, the sentence that I raised issue with is as follows: efforts will be made to ensure that different political groups are represented across the 4 elected members of the working group. The proposal is slightly different. Different political groups must be represented across the 4 members wherever possible. So that's the amendment we're tabling.
Perfect. That then stops the monopoly of one group, where depending on future election outcomes and things like that. Are there any problems with that wording? Should we just...
Can we get rid of wherever possible?
Read it one more time.
I don't think you can actually, Hayley, but different political groups must be represented across the 4 members wherever possible. I think the challenge is by removing that, if you do end up with a uniparty situation, you then can't put 4 members forward, right? I don't think it's ever going to happen, but you just don't know, do you?
Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
Okay, so I'm seeing a few blank faces, but does what Councillor Tranter said make sense? We happy with that wording? I'm seeing nods. Okay. The proposal is to ignore everything related to design codes and any mysterious parallel working group, and to focus entirely on what I wrote originally, and to adopt these terms of reference subject to the 4 changes that I outlined a few moments ago. Cliff was indicating those. Sorry, Cliff.
Sure. From where I sit, I think that if it's permissible, there would be merit in including within here the ability to invite, whether it's co-opted or invite to a specific meeting, other members of this committee for topic-specific discussion points. Just from my own area, and I'm very happy to not be able to come to all these extra meetings, but with Green Wheel, community buildings, community transport, various areas of knowledge and interest, it would be disappointing not to be able to input where appropriate.
Totally agree. Are members happy with that? So I'm going to include some wording along the lines of invite topic-specific SMEs as required. And I think we should report back who comes and when as well. Okay. Are there any last comments? Councillor Tranter.
Sorry, we didn't cover interim.
Yes, we did. It's not interim. It's permanent. It's exactly as the proposal outlined on the agenda. We haven't even mentioned the word interim. You're obviously going to lally. Sorry, you're not. You're fine. I am, though. Are there any last comments? Is anyone unclear on what we're voting on? No. So we're adopting these, and we can always revisit them as we need to. I think once we should probably think about how we nominate people to be part of this first meeting. So all those in favour of adopting these terms of reference subject to those minor changes, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you. We got there. Now, it's not on the agenda, but do we want to have a conversation now about who is represented from CBC and from the Town Council? Councillor Tranter.
I think given, and I hesitate to mention the detailed design code discussion all over again, but given the seeming pace and priority that is now being put into Land East from the developer, I fear if we wait to the next meeting of the Biggleswade Joint Committee to undertake this action, we may already have missed our first chance to engage as a working group.
Agreed. Okay, so it sounds sensible then that we go ahead and appoint people now. So the terms of reference obviously say that the chairman of Joint Committee and the deputy chairman of Joint Committee are represented. So we're looking for one more from CBC and one more from the Town Council. We are representative across groups wherever possible. So I'm really looking for somebody from your group, Hayley, and then one more Town Councillor.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Tranter, please.
Councillor Tranter, do you accept the nomination?
I do, thank you, Chair.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a nomination for Councillor Tranter. Do we have any nominations from the Town Council side? So I think this has to be a non-Conservative councillor if possible. Councillor Alban. Do you want to just put your microphone on for the minutes, please, Councillor Alban?
He said he consent to it if his name's put forward, so I'll put his name forward.
Very good. I think that's a great idea. Perfect then. So we have a proposal for Councillor Tranter and Councillor Alban to be accepted. Councillor Strawn, do you
just an
want to comment?
observation, is there a provision for a substitute in case that any member is unable to attend?
Do you know, I think we have to be a bit careful. So there was a reason I didn't include that because originally, because this is so important that members need to be trying to clear their diaries to prioritise this. And I put myself there as well, somebody who works full-time in London. So.
I'm quite happy, I just thought for clarification purposes.
Councillor Russell.
I think that's right, because it's going to be difficult for some people to attend, but we are not this is a working group. It's not a formal committee that's going to be making decisions.
Right.
So we don't need substitutes for voting reasons.
Yeah.
And as long as there are at least 4 people out of the 6, then we can have sensible discussions and bring them back to this forum.
Agreed. Perfect. Okay, so we have a proposal, and that is for, we obviously have chairman and deputy chairman, but then also Councillor Tranter and Councillor Alban to join this working group. So all those in favour of accepting Councillor Tranter and Councillor Alban, if you could please show. Any against? Any abstentions? Dragged kicking and screaming. That's okay. Thank you, everybody. Item 9C. Market Square vision. So can we deal with this under exempt? Do we need to provide a verbal update now, Ian? I noticed Councillor Barrett's not here this evening, so.
I think the division of labour was that Councillor Barrett was going to do this bit and I was going to do the bit in exempt.
Well, we'll bring it all into exempt then, that's fine. Item 10, future agenda items for the Biggleswade Joint Committee. So we've spoken before about the local plan call for sites. That's coming, whenever it's coming, it will be here. The other one, I've had a request from Councillor Strawn for banking provision. Now, there's a reason I didn't put it on this agenda, and that is because there was a motion to full council at Central Beds around an audit of banking hubs across central Bedfordshire. So basically, Central Beds to take a look and see which towns and villages were most in need of a banking hub. Interestingly, since that motion was passed, Biggleswade has lost 2 banks. And I have been in touch with the councillor who moved the motion, and she has not heard anything about banking hub audit. So I'm going to take that one away and see if I can bring something to joint committee next time round. Councillor Whitaker.
totally support that. I'm also just interested to understand the role of the post office in that, and maybe they could be invited, perhaps, if they're happy to come along, because my understanding is they are taking on a lot of local banking. Whether we can develop something around the post office, or whether they'd be interested in that, but that may be something for discussion in the meeting. But if they were keen to come, I'd love to see them.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure that we can note that. Councillor Strawn, then Councillor Russell. Sorry, Councillor Strawn, Councillor Russell.
Perhaps it would help this committee if I just updated. A group of members from the town council, in fact, met with one of the local post office representatives, I think it was last week, and had a discussion and have got a much better understanding of how the banking hub and the criteria, etc., and how a banking hub works. And I think there could be a report that could possibly come to this joint committee from that working group and from the town council, because I'm sure there'll be a report going to the town council about that. But it was very instructive and answered some of the questions that Councillor Whitaker has asked. But I think it would be helpful for this joint committee to understand how it works. But the town council is actively pursuing that, and is indeed meeting another post office master, I think, at the end of the month.
Okay, so if you want to bring something to joint committee, just in recommendation form, I think perhaps as an invited speaker, whether he wants to come to the town council or here, I'm open to that discussion. But Councillor Russell, did you want to comment?
Well, I was going to say, similar to Councillor Strawn, we've already had one of the postmasters at the town council meeting, and he is very enthusiastic on helping as much as he can. But there are certain rules within the post office, as well as all the rules about banking hubs. And I wasn't party of the meeting with the postmaster that was referred to from last week. But I think it's right that we try and bring something to the next joint committee that enables everybody around the table to understand what the issues are, because it's more complex than even we thought, isn't it?
Okay, thank you. Did you have a last comment, Councillor Whitaker, or is that okay to bring something next joint committee from this working group?
I think bring something, and I'd love to see the postmasters if they want to come. But also, I think we're all capable of seeing the papers that are going to come from your working group to town council, whether that gets flagged up by the clerk. I'm happy, whatever way it works. We can look at that. It can come to this committee as well, but I think we're all capable of looking at that before the next joint committee as well. So we're abreast of what was discussed, because I think that the fact you've had those meetings should hopefully help make it all move a bit faster.
Perfect. Briefly.
Perhaps it could be mentioned when it's brought to the town council that copies should be provided to the members of the joint committee from central beds. Okay.
Yeah. So if it's coming to town council, feel free to push it to this committee with recommendations or your invited speaker. We'll discuss that offline. That's perfect. Are there any other future agenda items, strategic agenda items, that members would like to see at future meetings? Councillor Whitaker.
I'm going to just go for it. I think based on this evening's discussions, I think we're going to want health to come back again. Apologies. We might want to take it offline and discuss exactly what we want and be very specific about what we want from that. But I wasn't satisfied in any way, shape or form by this evening. And therefore, I would think we're going to want it to come back.
It's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, that's a good suggestion, I think. I'm seeing nods, and I read the mood of the room when they were here, and I think you're quite right. Councillor Tranter, were you signalling?
Yeah, I was only going to support that point. I think I've heard the word disappointed across. I may have used a slightly different word by text message to someone to my left during that presentation, but I do think it needs to come back, and I do think it needs to stay in our crosshairs.
Okay, let's take that offline and think about what a recommendation looks like, where it goes, and how we have an impact. Thank you. Item 11, items for information. There's some consultations ongoing. Please feel free to fill them out at your leisure. Take them to town council if you want to. I think we've addressed most of them already via town council. Item 12, exempt minutes of the joint committee meeting from the last meeting. And yes, sorry, go on.
On the consultations, I'm conscious that we're probably a bit closer to the budget than town councillors are.
Yeah.
And did they have any queries that they had that they wanted to ask us about the budget? Not that we might be able to answer them all, but we might be able to have a go at some of them.
Did town councillors have any questions about Central Beds' budget?
No, it was decided not to respond except as individual councillors.
No.
Understanding the pressures that Central Beds are under, concerns were raised about possible closures as the tidy tip and the effect on dumping in the countryside if there's less facility at the tidy tips. The Bedfordshire Association of Town and Parish Councils has already been considering what the impact on town and parish councils might be of the reductions in services. And we were very glad to see that a deputy cabinet member has been appointed. And certainly the Bedfordshire Association will be trying to work with Councillor Goodchild to see what might happen as a result of the budget and as a result of his new role. So it's all happening at that level.
Councillor Strawn?
Just a further observation, the town council with other councils was invited to a meeting for next Tuesday evening to have the budget process explained and what's happening. And I attended it last year and it's very helpful. But unfortunately this year we've got our main council meeting to set the precept. So nobody from Biggleswade will be able to attend on that evening. But last year that meeting was very helpful and constructive and very interesting. And I found it rewarding.
Excellent. We'll note that. Okay. Are there any last comments on the consultations? No. Okay, item 12. So we have two exempt items. One is to consider the minutes. The other is to consider the town centre vision. And I look to wrap this up about 9 o'clock if that's all right. So it might take me until 9 o'clock to read this new wording that we have to read out to go into exempt session, but I'll do my best. For the use by the chair. Oh no, I don't read that bit, do I? It's the bold bit, is it? Okay, and I don't say the bit in red. Councillor Grant Fage, do move that in accordance with section 12(1), good God, section 1 of the Public Bodies Act of 1960, the press and public be excluded for the following items on the ground of confidential nature of business to be transactioned, those being the exempt minutes and the market vision item. Don't read that bit. Members have voted that this, oh no, we have to take a vote, don't we? Right. All those in favour, could somebody please move the proposal that we go into exempt? Is there a seconder? Can we see a vote, show of hands to move into exempt? That is unanimous. Please minute that that's unanimous. I'll now read out the next bit. Members have voted this meeting now be closed so that we do move into an exempt session in accordance with or pursuant to section 1 of the Public Bodies Act, which I literally mentioned a moment ago. The press and public be excluded for the following items, again, which I've just noted. Okay, we've got to condense that. We've managed this for years without reading this. Oh, it's a stitch up for me, I know it. Councillor Strawn.
For future reference, I think that we'd actually only need it read once because the motion, once it's passed, it's actually agreed it, so I don't think it would be necessary to repeat it.
Okay.
I didn't think, look at what's in this thing, it shows
I don't understand why it's been changed unless the legislation has changed.
Thank you. Oh,
So I just think it's fine.
Thank God.